Hello, and welcome to another episode of Professional Book Girl. My name is Kayla, and I read a ton of books so that I can recommend the best to you, and that's what we're doing today. And on every episode, I feel like eventually and that's what we're doing today might have to come out of that little tagline, but we'll see as these things evolve. As what the heck am I trying to say? These things evolve as they tend to do. I don't know. Anyway, we're just going to get into it. So we have a book club on this podcast. If you are not aware, that is our first announcement for this week. Our March book club pick is Listen for the Lie by Amy Tintera. This is a thriller based around a podcast, which is very fun and meta. And the way that the Professional Book Girl book club works, that is a tongue twister. You just read the book on your own time, and then on March 28th, tune into the book club episode where I will give a spoiler-free review. The way that they've kind of been running is I walk through what happened in the book and give my thoughts as they go. So also, if you don't want to read that book, but you want to find out what happened, you will hear all of that in that episode. You can submit your thoughts on the book and have your voice a part of it by either typing out what you thought and DMing it to me at kredwhat or at Professional Book Girl, or emailing it to professionalbookgirlpod@gmail.com. Or you can record a voice memo and email it to me, and I will play it in the episode. We've had people contributing to all the book clubs so far, and it's been so much fun. I'm so excited to read this book, but I'm waiting until the end of the month, so my thoughts are super, super fresh before I record. But I'm seeing so many people love this book. It's actually available from Book of the Month this month, so if you are unable to get it from your library, because I know it's a new release, it literally just came out, you can get it from Book of the Month for pretty cheap. So that's the only announcement today. Also, just make sure you're following me on Instagram, follow the show, rate, subscribe, whatever. Let's get into it. So this week, I am obsessed with this social media trend, and in typical Professional Book Girl fashion, I'm going to do it a few weeks late on the show. So this is the weekly report trend. I actually haven't done this on my Instagram, kredwhat, because I feel like I'm just like, I was going to say, I feel like I'm always reporting on these things as they happen, but I haven't been sharing as much of my personal life on my Instagram. Like definitely not as much as I used to over the years. I've been doing this for 5 years. I've had Kayla for 5 years. It's not a conscious decision. I just sometimes feel like, do people even care about this? So I won't share it. And it's weird. Like as my account gets bigger, I share less of my personal life. I think I'm just scared of trolls coming after me. But I do like my little weekly photo dump on pretty much every single Sunday. I share a week's worth of photos that were in my camera roll from that week, and it's fun. I'm seeing other people start to do that on social, and then I kind of started that trend. Then this weekly report trend came about. So I haven't done this one exactly because I feel like I kind of get this message across between this podcast and my little photo dumps, but I'm going to do it here today. So basically there's a different acronym for the word report. So what am I reading, eating, playing, obsessing with, recommending, and treating? So, what am I reading this week? I actually was in a little bit of a reading slump, in the sense that, not that I wasn't really loving books, I felt like I was going much slower, and I was watching a lot more TV shows in the last month, I would say, than I typically do. And I was just taking time away from reading. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think when you go through phases like that, it's totally fine. I still have been reading every day. I read for like really at least 2 hours every day. I just felt like in a little bit of like a rut, I would say, instead of a reading slump, but I felt like I'm coming out of it. I just read, well, actually on this episode, the theme of this episode is recent favorites. So you're going to be hearing about some of my recent favorites, but I did just read Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld, which has been on my TBR for a while. Since 2020, I've been reading Curtis Sittenfeld's backlog. My first book from her was in 2020 when I read Rodham, and I loved it. And I tend to either really love or just like I like dislike, really. Like there's no in between how I feel about her books. I did not love Prep, but I feel like I can't say that I didn't like it, because the writing and the storytelling is just so good. Like I just really love Curtis Sittenfeld's books, and I will read like all of them, but I also didn't love romantic comedy. So I loved Rodham, I loved Eligible, and I loved American Wife. And then I didn't really love romantic comedy, and I didn't really love Prep. It's basically about this girl, Lee, who is from Indiana, and she's a scholarship student at this boarding school in Massachusetts. And you guys know I'm doing my private reread. So I thought that I would be so obsessed with it. But Lee was so insufferable. And I know we're not supposed to like her. And like we meet her when she's 14. So like I do feel bad for hating this child, but I just could not with her. Like I couldn't wait to finish the book because I needed to be out of her headspace. She was just like not even an unlikable character. Like I really could not. But I'm glad to finally have tried that book and crossed it off of my list. And then at this time of recording, I am currently in the middle of Josh and Hazel's Guide to Not Dating by Christina Lauren, which honestly, I'm not super obsessed. It's just super quick read, so I am flying through it. But Hazel is just so like not me. And I don't know. I'm just not really loving it. So that is what I have been reading this week. All right, eating. Actually timely for me to be doing this. So I'm not on a diet. I don't like to use that term, but I have just been eating so badly for all of 2024. And this is something that I always do, but not for this long of a period actually, but I'll like lose a little bit of weight and then I'll be like, I could just eat whatever I want. And I've never ever been that person that can just eat whatever they want. Like when I'm eating like shit, I mean, maybe not everybody else can notice, but like I notice it. I feel different. I feel like I look different. My clothes fit me different. So for all of January and February, I've just been eating so bad. But I actually, though, have been on it on like my workout game. Like I've been trying to walk for 30 minutes every day and I do my Melissa Wood Health Pilates every day. And I've been pretty consistent, like doing both almost every single day so far this year. But I think because I was home a lot in January and in February. And usually when I'm home, I'm out of my routine and I'm not eating better. So I'm just trying to eat more healthily and cut down on how often I'm ordering out. I used to be like, not used to, but like I typically would be like, I don't feel like cooking. And even when I have like healthy food in the fridge and then I'm just ordering really unhealthy food. So I just need to get it together because I think I've said this before, but it's a before I turn 30 goal. I'm turning 30 at the end of July. My birthday is July 27th. Put it in your calendar. But 2 weeks before my birthday, my younger brother is getting married. And the wedding is kind of serving as a propelling force to really just this idea I've always had about when I turn 30, which I'm very excited to enter my 30s. But I want to go into my 30s in the best shape I've ever been in. So I've been saying I want to be the hottest person at my brother's wedding. And I need to start doing some of that work now because the wedding is coming up. So I'm just trying to eat healthier, which basically means instead of buying another round of Girl Scout cookies, I'm just looking for like healthier treats and desserts. And I actually saw this on TikTok. And you guys, I am obsessed. So basically what I've been doing is slicing up an apple, which I usually am not a big apple girly. I used to love apples growing up, but then when I had braces, I stopped eating them because when you bite into the apple, it was just like torture with the braces. But I've been slicing up the apple, coating them in cinnamon, putting them in the air fryer for 10 minutes. That alone, it already tastes like apple pie. But then I put it on top of vanilla Greek yogurt. Oh my God. I was eating it last night and I was like, how is this allowed? Like it's so good. And it's just an apple and yogurt. And I am obsessed. I now am like, I look forward to eating that every night as a little dessert. Um, Love it. If you have any healthy recipes, definitely like please slide in my DMs. Easy to make though, because I don't really like to cook. I'm a little excited. I'm going to try a new recipe this weekend. I'm basically just looking for I get like in a rut of like I'm like this, like I'll eat the same foods every single day. So I'm trying to just like do that, but have a few different like healthy recipes to swap in and out. So I'm gonna try tomorrow night the sheet pan meal. I'm gonna do zucchini, tomato, red onion, eggplant. I think that's it. And then like a chicken and then put that in the oven. And then I'm going to have it over a little bit of brown rice and spinach and then put on like tzatziki and feta on top to kind of like make my own kava bowl at home. So I'm excited for that. So I've just been in like my chef era, I guess, my healthy using my air fryer to make a dessert era. The next one in the weekly report is playing. So I told you guys I've been watching a lot more TV shows. I feel like I ran through all of that though in my February wrap up. So check out that episode if you want to hear all the shows I was watching then. But we're in March now. We're 1 week into March. So I'm watching Gossip Girl. I started rewatching it I think in January actually. I don't know if it wasn't the end of 2023. I started it in this year, but also, how are we already in the third month of this year? Like, I cannot. I'm rewatching Gossip Girl for the first time. I started watching it when it aired. I was 13 years old. It literally changed my life, changed the course of my life, like propelled me to want to live in New York, work in fashion, all of the things. So much about me came from being obsessed with Gossip Girl. And I watched it literally only when it was on originally aired, never rewatched it. So I'm on it for the first time. And I kind of fell away from it because I started watching all of these shows. I also had so many shows on in January and February. But now that like Love Island's over, which that's on every day, so that took up a lot of time. And now that I'm working again, like I've been having Gossip Girl on in the background while I'm working. Really loving it. I'm on season 2. I just watched the famous iconic 3 words 8 letters say I'm your scene and just like, ugh, still obsessed. I cannot. I'm trying to listen to new music because I don't do that a lot. I tend to just listen to the artists that I love and the albums that I love. And then just when they have a new album out, hop onto that. So I told you for my February wrap up, I started listening to Noah Kahan. And then this month I started listening to Sabrina Carpenter and Gracie Abrams, really just on that Taylor Swift train. I saw Gracie open for Taylor when I went to the Eras tour in LA and I really liked her. So checking that out. And then I've been trying to get back into listening to my audiobook. You guys know I'm doing one historical audiobook a month. It ends up kind of not being one a month. It's just like always have one going in the background. And I kind of fell away from listening to it, which is like a little bit like says a lot about the book that I was listening to, but it got to like a really good portion. So that's what I'm playing. Obsessing with is routine, which I'm always obsessed with routine because I am somebody that needs routine and structure and it just makes me feel safe and happy. But now that I'm back at work and also trying to be healthy, I'm in like this new routine that I'm really enjoying. I've been getting up early because I have to for work, but I started doing my morning skincare routine again, which really fell away when I was unemployed because I was just like sleeping in all day. So I'm like ice rolling and face sculpting and like all the serums and moisturizers. And it makes me just feel so good after I've been working out in the morning, which also makes me feel good. Just really like getting up and moving and getting my brain going. It's just been like a really great new morning routine. I think one day I'll probably do like a day in the life and of a remote worker because I now work remotely and like have that all in there. It's not here yet, but I ordered a desk chair. So when I record, I'm sitting at my desk, which is really just my vanity. But now that I'm working again and I work remotely, my vanity functions as my desk. Like I sit here for my Zoom. So when you're watching Professional Book Girl, like you're actually seeing my work background. My coworkers get the PBG background in all of my meetings. But I sit on this stool and it's like a really cute little stool, but it like kills my back. So I ordered a really cute desk chair. It's not here yet, but I can't wait. I'm sure I'll post about it on my Instagram. Recommending. I feel like I'm just recommending everything all the time. Honestly, I'm a professional recommender. Forget influencer, it's recommender. I will say 2 recommendations for you right now, though. The show The Traders, which like I feel like I've spoken about how much I love it enough. Actually, the day of recording, the finale and reunion air tonight, and I'm so excited. And then also, I finally bought the Kindle remote. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, this is this little like Bluetooth remote that mine's actually not Bluetooth though, that you can use so that way you don't have to like physically touch your Kindle to turn the pages. I am really in my Kindle era lately. I've actually been like, I have my physical TBR and I've been getting the books on Libby so I can read on my Kindle even if I already have the physical book. I just have been really liking um like not having to turn my reading lamp on and just only having the like super ambient light on in my room and like curling up either in bed or in my chair and like you just like sit in a different way when you're reading on your Kindle. So I will typically, if I'm reading in bed, sometimes I'm under the covers and I don't want to have one arm out of the cover to turn the page on my Kindle. Or when I'm sitting in my chair, I'll sit with my knees up and like rest my Kindle on my knees. And it's just nice to not have to touch the Kindle. And like today when I was eating lunch, I had my Kindle propped up on like actually against like my coaster set. And I didn't have to keep reaching my arm out to turn the page. I could just press my little remote, which is like peak lazy, but it's so nice. I am though having some like technical issues. Like sometimes it'll just turn the page backwards instead of forwards, or I'll have to press it a bunch of times to get it to work. But so far, I am enjoying it. The letter in the weekly report is T for treating, aka treating yourself. And I've literally never denied myself a treat. That's the story of my life. I'm always looking for new ways to treat myself. I have been because I got a new job, so I obviously had to celebrate that. I also like I literally have a shopping problem. I try to work on it. It goes through phases. I'm in a little bit of a bad phase right now. I always say I don't drink and I don't do drugs. I shop. I've been buying office things. So I told you I bought the desk chair. I got like a phone stand, kind of just trying to it's treating myself, but it's kind of also a necessity because I work remotely now. And then to celebrate getting my new job, I bought myself some books. So I met up with my friend Amanda the bookish librarian on Instagram, and we went book shopping, and it was so much fun, but we were terrible influences on each other because we would just be walking around and say, oh, I love that one. And then the one of us would pick it up. I bought myself also, this was the real treat, really. I ordered all 6 of the Alison Ware Tudor Queens books. I talked about the first one about Catherine of Aragon in my February wrap up. I knew I was going to read all of them, but I was like, they're just so pretty and I want to add them to my series shelf. So that was my big treat for myself. I'm trying not to treat myself though. Like, gone are the Girl Scout cookies treat, and I need to stop spending money on treats. So really for me, that one should be stop treating yourself, but that wouldn't go along with this trend. Anyway, I guess it's time to go back to the first letter of this weekly report reading and tell you about 3 of my recent favorite reads. So 2 of these books I briefly spoke about in the February wrap up episode. And this is something that will kind of become like a conundrum as PBG goes on, because obviously in those episodes, I'm going to talk about all the books that I read, but there are going to be ones that I just want to go more in depth in. And it's obvious when you listen to those, that some of them I go in depth in on that episode. And then there will be times like this where I'll kind of save one or a few or whatever to talk about in a different episode in a more in-depth way. So 2 of these have already been recommended to you from me, also a million times on my Instagram, but I'm so excited to talk about these 3 books. The first one is Becoming Madam Secretary by Stephanie Dray. If you listen to the February wrap-up episode, I said I was almost done reading it at the time. I finished it. I loved this book so much. First of all, it comes out tomorrow, so I feel like historical fiction girls, immediately add it to your list. And the rest of you, I'm going to do my best to convince you to pick this up. So this is a biographical fiction about Frances Perkins, and I'm assuming most of you listening do not know who she is, because I didn't know who she is, and she's been lost to history a bit, which is absolutely insane, because if you are American and you are listening to this podcast, her work has had a direct impact on your life. She, like, it's insane when you read this book and you're like, oh my God, I had this huge moment, because she was the one who campaigned. Okay, I'm getting so ahead of myself. I'm just going to go in order actually. So this book opens up and we meet her as she is moving to New York, and she comes with a reputation for kind of being a bit of a troublemaker. And the book opens up in the early 1900s. It's before World War I. And she is living as a single woman in this boarding house in Hell's Kitchen. And at this time, Hell's Kitchen was hell. That's why the neighborhood got its name. There was a lot of crime. Gangs were kind of in charge. There's a lot of poverty. This is the era in America where, when I learned about it in school, it was like the child factory workers and Triangle Shirtwaist Fire, and the bakeries and the food places and stuff having literal shit in the food, and the FDA hadn't been started yet. And it's just crazy to think that was not very long ago, only 120 years ago, and that's what New York used to be like. So it's also crazy to me that when I was learning about all that in school, though, no one mentioned Frances Perkins to me, because I would not have forgotten her. So the book opens when she moves to New York, and she has a reputation for, she's not scared of a fight. She is I guess she's a lobbyist, I would say, is how she starts off her career in New York. And she falls in with this group of women. There's this one woman she really looks up to. I want to say her name is Frances Kelly, but I think I'm making that up. And she starts kind of grassroots trying to make change. She is meeting with these immigrant mothers who cannot feed their children and they're starving, and she is using her own money to get them food. And then she's campaigning local politicians, and she's having to go to gang leaders because they're really the ones controlling everything. And she eventually ends up becoming an actual lobbyist in the New York state government. So she is up in Albany literally petitioning the politicians there for labor laws. And at this time she's literally saying it wasn't even 40 hour. I think it was 60-hour work week she was fighting for, which is crazy to look back on. Like, there were no weekends. It's literally the American Girl doll Samantha, the Samantha movie. Like, when she goes and that little boy gets his hand stuck in the sewing machine, that is such a huge part of this book. And I think that's why it so deeply resonated with me, because I had these references to this time as a child. And then this book was really kind of my first deep dive into learning about it as an adult. This is very much a Great Depression book and like all of the industrial issues that went along with that time period. And it's the most robust and I would say best historical fiction I've read of that time period. And I actually can't even, the only other Great Depression book that comes to mind is The Four Winds by Kristin, which to me, that was more of a Dust Bowl book, which is just the Dust Bowl is not my vibe. Not that this stuff is either, but Frances Perkins is my vibe. So she is in New York and she is lobbying for really just basic things that we completely take advantage of today. You know, a big thing of hers is fire safety and in factories, and she like getting sprinklers installed and having fireproof windows and fire escapes. And she eventually starts taking these politicians into factories and showing them what is wrong with it, and they are so shocked. But FDR is a huge, huge part of this book. My favorite president, but he does not overshadow Frances at all. They had such a partnership, and I love their relationship in this book. They really kind of like would banter with each other, and Frances actually hated him when they first met. She thought he was very arrogant, very stuck up. She met him at a social event because one of her best friends was friends with Eleanor, who was my favorite first lady. There's a theme going here. And he was there and he was like talking about how he was going to go into politics, and she was just like, I can't with this guy. Like, she did not like him. And now she's in Albany working as a lobbyist, and FDR is there, and she is like, he's not really supporting the bills that he's saying that for the issues that he ran on, and she just like can't stand him. So time goes on though. This book covers so much. It is a long book. It covers so much historical ground though. And the issues that she's fighting for just become more and more prevalent. So like I mentioned the factories, I mentioned fire safety, I mentioned food. She goes into bakeries and there's like rats literally in the food, and then that food is sold and these people have no idea. So it's really about educating the public and the lawmakers and getting positive change enacted. A huge, huge, huge event in this book is the Triangle Shirtwaist factory fire. I'm sure most of you listening know what this event is. I will never forget learning about it. This haunted me. And basically what it was though is this factory fire that broke out, the Triangle Shirtwaist fire. It was all women, and they're basically making shirts, and it went on fire, and it turned out that the factory owners had literally locked the women in so they could not get out, and these women had to just, most of them, if you were either burned alive or you had to jump out the window, and they died. And it was just this horrible, horrible tragedy. I went to FIT for college, which is the Fashion Institute of Technology, and I was there during one of the big anniversaries of it, maybe the 100th anniversary of it. And there was this ceremony on campus. I'll never forget to remember them. And I think about it so frequently, maybe because I live in New York, but it is just horrifying. And that did not ever have to happen if they just had, first of all, basic human decency. These women should not have been locked in there, but also just basic fire safety and precautions. And Frances, actually, this is a real thing. And this scene is so vivid in this book. It is upsetting and hard to read, but it is so important. She witnessed the fire and the women falling out of the windows. And she already was so passionate about this cause, but it just reinvigorated her and made her so much more passionate and kind of changed the course of her life. So she becomes a full force political force, which is it's also so crazy because, you know, women get the vote during this book. So she was such a political figure in a time when she didn't even have the right to vote, which is just so remarkable to me. And then the Great Depression happens, and she is trying to figure out ways to, you know, there's a helicopter. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but whatever. Welcome to New York. Speaking of things in New York, but she is working on programs to help people with the depression. She gets an influx of letters of people saying, you know, please help us. Like, I can't feed my family, or my brother tried to steal a piece of coal to heat the house and he was killed, and these horrible, horrible events. And what happened during the Great Depression, FDR became president, and he asked her to be a member of his cabinet. Is it the labor secretary? I think, whatever, she ran the Department of Labor. So Frances, honestly should have led with this. Frances Perkins was the first female member of a presidential cabinet, and she was the longest running labor cabinet person. And the second half of the book is following her journey as a member of FDR's cabinet. And I loved this so, so much. I loved learning about FDR's presidency through this lens. So many things I thought that he did. It was Frances. We have Frances to thank for Social Security, for unemployment. She was on FDR because he said he would do it. And then he kind of kept pulling back on that. And she was a woman in this space and none of them respected her. I imagine it's hard to be a woman in that space today, but imagine 100 years ago and they were like, why are you here? Like, it is just so inspiring. And it made me so hopeful about politics and that the fact that you actually can enact positive change. And, we're in an election year in America and it's just like, it's bleak. It's bleak, guys. I can't. I'm actually not going to talk about it because it stresses me out too much. But reading this made me hopeful that, like there actually are politicians who can enact positive change and there are politicians who have done it. And I think I can't even think of any politician in history who has done as much as she has done for this country. So, Social Security, unemployment. When I read this book, I was still on unemployment. I literally would not have survived being unemployed without unemployment support. And that is thanks to my girl, Frances. And it was just a very this is what I was talking about in the beginning. I was like, oh, wait, reading this, I was like, wow, you read about these things like with fire safety and things like that. And like her work and a weekend and a 40-hour work week, not even a 60, like her work affected all of us. But then even these things of I literally would not have survived without unemployment, like government unemployment over the last few months of my life. And that is literally, I have her to thank for that. And it is just so interesting. And, she started the Conservation Corps, which had people going to plant trees and work on dams and stuff like that during the Depression and getting people back to work in any way she could. She just did so much for this country. And it is such a shame that she has been lost to history. She also, so the book doesn't cover World War II. It kind of ends right before it though. And she was very aware of something is happening in Europe. And she was kind of press FDR and we need to be worried about this. She was fighting to bring Jewish refugees into this country in a time when nobody wanted them. So in World War II historical fiction, you will read about, America's only taking in this many children. She was finding legal loopholes and getting people in and trying to save these people. She just did so much. I could talk about her for hours. And actually, I did talk about her for another full hour beyond what you just heard because I got to interview Stephanie Dray, the author of this book that I loved so much. We chatted about Frances. The episode comes in at just under an hour and it could have gone on forever. She gave so many great insights on Frances, on writing a book like this, on historical fiction, the state of the genre. I highly, highly recommend that interview, which will be out on Thursday. So surprise, you get two episodes this week. I really buried the lead here. I should have started with that, but I wanted to hook you in first before I gave you a prize. I loved this book so much. I gave this 4 stars. After chatting with Stephanie, I fell for it even harder, hearing about what went into this book, why she chose to write about Frances. She has a strong family personal connection to things that happen in this book that I thought were just so fascinating. In retrospect, this should have been a 5-star read. So sometimes I do think that. And I just love this so, so much. I really, really cannot recommend this more for my historical fiction girls if you are looking to learn about a lost American, hidden historical American figure who has done so much for us. You need to read this book. I just reminded myself. My brother is a high school history teacher. And sometimes when I'm on my little, I'm learning so much about history, I'll be like, you need to tell your students this. And when I finish this, I was like, I need to text Sean and tell him he needs to teach his students about Frances Perkins. They're nowhere near learning about this time period, but I feel like I just want him to tell them that. The last time I did that, I was watching the show The First Ladies. This ties together because it's about Eleanor Roosevelt. And fun fact, I fact checked it and this is true. After Pearl Harbor, Eleanor addressed the nation before FDR did. Isn't that so wild? I thought that was so amazing. And I doubt he told it to his class, but I want him to. If any other history teachers are listening, teach your students about this, please, because I wish I learned about her back in the day, I feel like it would have just made such a more lasting impact, because I always say, like, I love history, but I love historical fiction because I get to learn what the women were doing. So that is Becoming Madam Secretary by Stephanie Dray. 4 stars, obsessed. Check out the interview on Thursday. All right, I've got a thriller and another historical fiction. And what do we want? Well, you obviously can't tell me, but we're going to go thriller next. I guess we'll break it up a bit. So, this is another one I briefly spoke about on my February wrap up, and this is She's Not Sorry by Mary Kubica. This book comes out on April 2nd. So, I'm teasing you a bit again, but add it to your list, you guys. This is a Grey's Anatomy thriller. So this, well, first of all, I should say Mary Kubica writes really great page turners, super beach read thrillers. This is her 9th book. I have really loved some of them. The Good Girl is my favorite by her. This honestly is probably not my second favorite. I love Local Woman Missing. Some of them are a bit like more some of them are a miss for me, I would say. Like, she's a little hit or miss for me, but more so hit. This one hit. I really loved this book. So like I said, I teased already, this is a Grey's Anatomy thriller. So the main character in this book is Megan, and she's an ICU nurse, but she also has so many other things going on in her life. So she is divorced and she is raising a teenage daughter. I really love the way that Mary Kubica wrote about the divorce. Like, she made the decision, and not that I feel like sometimes in historical fiction, this is not historical fiction. Sometimes, actually, in historical fiction is the opposite of what I'm going to say, but sometimes in like contemporary fiction, when a woman is divorced, it kind of tends to be like more sad. And I don't think divorce is always a bad thing. So in this case, she made the decision, and she is very strong and empowered in that decision. And that was kind of just refreshing to read, as someone who comes from, I'm a child of divorce. But she's raising her daughter. She's a single parent. They live in Chicago. And one night she goes to and I mentioned she's an ICU nurse, but one night after work, she goes to this divorce support group, and she runs into an old friend from high school, and they are just catching up. And she's like, oh, like, obviously you're at a divorce support group. Like, what's been going on? So they're reconnecting and kind of helping each other out. And the friend is in a really bad situation. So there are like, both of those are 2 huge plot lines. The reconnection with the friend, and then her relationship with her ex. He's not a main character, but he is in it a bit. But her daughter, Sienna, is a huge part of the book. But then there is a patient at her hospital in the ICU who is I don't know how to explain this, but she's a suicide survivor. So she jumped off of a bridge with the intent of ending her life, and she survived, and now she's in the ICU. She's in a coma. She is so banged up. She's kind of like a celebrity in the hospital, though, because this story is everywhere. The fact that, a person jumps off of this bridge but then survived it, and now it's like, will they survive? Why? Like, the media are like speculating about her personal life, everything. So the patient's family is in the hospital every single day, and they start to really like Megan, and they basically got Megan just solely assigned to their daughter, and she starts getting to know the family, and through the family getting to know the patient. And she's wondering, like, how could somebody like this do that? And she has a family history with suicide. Suicide is a big plot point in this book, though, so content warning. So she's kind of like grappling with that, and like old memories are coming up. And as she gets to know the family, there's some like red flags. And one day there's a random guy in the hospital room, and she's like, what is going on here? So she starts wondering about the alleged suicide and who this person really is. At the same time, though, in Chicago, there is a man going around, and he will follow women home and then sexually assault them most of the time in their apartment building. So she's like, there's all these different things in her life, but it's written in a way that it doesn't feel like random, because it feels like we're getting to know her really as a person. And like, we all always have things that are going on in our lives. Like, I live in a major city. So the way that she wrote about a woman walking alone at night, knowing that these attacks are happening, was just very realistic to me. It all comes together in a way that multiple twists shocked me. And it's been a while since multiple twists shocked me. I couldn't put this down. I loved this so much. This is such a quick read. It is out in April, so if you live somewhere warm, bring it to the pool. If you're going on spring break, like bring it to the beach. It's just so good. And when I say Grey's Anatomy thriller, it's because most of it takes place in a hospital, and I really could just imagine this as an episode of Grey's Anatomy, which I mean that as the highest compliment. And guess what? I also got to interview Mary Kubica, and you can hear that chat. It is a spoiler-free chat about this book, She's Not Sorry, where, we talked about the book, we talked about what goes writing into thrillers, the state of the thriller genre. We talked, honestly, a lot about the writing process. I've been really intrigued by that when it comes to thriller authors. She told me how she got this idea, how the twist came to her. It was a really great discussion. I really enjoyed chatting with her. That one will not be out for a few weeks, though, so keep an eye out in the beginning of April for that interview, and pick up She's Not Sorry when it comes out on April 2nd. So that being said, author interviews are here. I've done 2. They're in the pipeline, they're scheduled. If there are any authors you would like to hear me chat with, if you have questions for specific authors, please let me know, DM me or email me, and I will do my best to try to chat with your favorite authors and get the questions you want answered. It is a privilege to me to be able to get to speak with authors, so I'm so excited to be doing it again. I really enjoy it, and I just had really, really great discussions with both Stephanie Dray and Mary Kubica. I gave She's Not Sorry 4 stars. That is the theme, actually, of this episode. And yeah, it is out on April 2nd. So the final book, and maybe the reason why most of you are here, is The Women by Kristin Hannah. I want to first start by talking about my history with Kristin Hannah. I have not read all of her books. I've read, I think, maybe 5. I read The Nightingale, loved. The Great Alone, loved. I did not expect to like that book, and I loved it. Firefly Lane, loved. And then I read The Four Winds and just did not love, because I just can't with the Dust Bowl. It's just too bleak and like not good vibes for me. Historical horror I am not interested in, but it's still in true Kristin Hannah fashion, was like beautifully written, and I guess it was a good story. That one didn't really work for me. And then now The Women, which is her latest release. So mostly have read kind of historical ones, but Firefly Lane is more contemporary. I do want to start reading more of her backlog. I love her writing. I love her storytelling. I think that her historical fiction is a little bit different to me, because for some reason I don't really think of her as a historical fiction author. So I approach it in a different way. But I was so excited when I heard about this book, because it is about the Vietnam War. So let's talk about my experience with the Vietnam War. I'm basically the fact that I barely know anything about it. This has never been a historical era that I've gone into, I think, because it is so complex and so much is at play, and I kind of just don't know where to start. I did not learn much about it in school. I feel like, they definitely talk about it, but it's something that I definitely got more of an education of, like talking to people or like overhearing people. Like, I obviously know Vietnam vets in my life and in my family. So just so complicated, and I just never had like a true real I've never consumed a piece of media, or even like I'm including like a historical documentary in that, I guess, that really just like kind of laid out everything that was at play. And I think that this book did that in a great way. And this is my first real full introduction to Vietnam War media. So maybe there are things that were left out, but I felt like, everything I know about it, how it is all these conflicting sides. It was so much upheaval, and people were so fired up about it on both sides, really. And I really, really learned a lot about the Vietnam War reading this book, and that is what I always love when I walk away from historical fiction. And now I would love to read more and learn more. I feel like this was a really great introduction to this era, and that's why I was really excited when I saw that she was covering it, because I just didn't know. And the first time my first memory of learning about it is on my 8th grade field trip to DC, when we went to the Vietnam War Memorial. And actually, the book ends with the opening of that memorial. So it was kind of like a full circle moment for me there. I'm not going to talk about like the history of the Vietnam War, I guess, because I don't fully know all of it. So I would need to like go and do some more research, but I will tell you through what happens in this book. Spoiler free, obviously. So, our main girl is Frankie, and she is from, I think it was Coronado Island off the coast of California. It is a Navy island. It's not a Navy base, but it like seems like it is in the sense that like everyone lives there, has like strong military ties. She's from a very well-to-do family. Her dad is an Irish immigrant who married a wealthy girl and inherited her family business, and he always placed such a like high honor on serving in the military, and part of that is because he wasn't able to serve in World War II, I think because of like an injury or something like that. But he, in his office, he has this heroes wall where it's all their family members who in his eyes like they served in the military and they are heroes. And the vibe I got in this time about the military was that it was so, they all were seen as heroes because the war for them that they're really talking about is World War II. And it's the same way, you know, we still look at these World War II soldiers. I'm obsessed with the show Masters of the Air, and I feel like I've spoken about it every single week on this podcast. I'm so upset there's only 2 episodes left, but I'm like loving it. And you watch that and you can't not think for a second, like these men and women are heroes. Um, so that's kind of the environment she grew up in. She has an older brother, Finley, and when the book opens up, it's his going away party because he's going off to fight in Vietnam. And this is at the beginning of the war, where everything in the media is really saying that we're meaning America, America is winning the war, like it's going great, and it's a huge honor to serve still. And I think people were dodging the draft at this time, but it hadn't really ramped up to that point yet. So it opens up and she's at her family have like this huge mansion and they're hosting this going away party for him. Her and her brother were extremely, extremely close. So and what ends up happening, she's at the party and one of her brother's friends, she goes into her dad's office to like take a breather, and this isn't spoilers, it's literally like the first chapter of the book. And one of her brother's friends comes in and he's like, oh, like he says something about like her being on the wall, and she's like, no, like I can't be. And he says to her, women can be heroes. And that really like opens her mind up. And I've seen people online criticizing that line and saying like it's so stupid and cliche, but I feel like maybe the people saying that aren't historical fiction readers, because you have to put yourself in her perspective. At this time, it's the 60s, and like women couldn't have credit cards at this time without their husbands signing off on it. Like she really was taught and raised to just get married and have kids. So for her, that was a novel, groundbreaking idea. Like, oh, like women can be heroes and I can go make a difference. So she was in nursing school. So she decides the next day that she's going to be a hero, and she goes first to the Navy, and they say like Navy nurses need a lot more training. She went to the Air Force then, and same thing. The Army said they would take her. So she enlists to become a war nurse during Vietnam. And she goes and tells her family, and she assumes that they're going to be elated, and they're pissed. Like they can't believe it because in their minds, in this world she grew up in, the women's place is at home. To them, like the women can't be on the hero wall, but she goes. And this is when the first part of the book kicks off, really. So the first part of the book, it's split up into 2 parts, is about her time at war. I thought the whole book would be her time at war. It's not. So we follow her on 2 tours, and she lands there, and she is like, you know, she has her little guide from the Army, and she's in the outfit they give her, and she is so unprepared. She has no idea what is happening. Her first day in the hospital, there's like a mass cal, which is a mass casualty event. So she is seeing these men come in dying and bleeding and missing limbs, and it is very graphic. I will say I get asked a lot with books, actually, is it gory? And usually the answer is no. This one, yes. It depends how vivid your imagination is, I would say, but there are literally like, she will say, oh, a man came in just holding his own leg. Like it is brutal. And she is on the front line. She is in this hospital. The one she's in the beginning is a bit further from the front, but she ends up moving where she is in like one of the most dangerous areas. And she starts, as time goes on and as the war goes on and as she's seeing things that are happening and she's seeing villagers come in, she's starting to wonder, why are we fighting this war? And she'll see the media reports that there was only 200 casualties, and she was like, there was more than that in my hospital. And she's questioning everything, but at the same time she's proud and honored to be helping save these men's lives. And even when she can't, she says, like, sometimes I'm the last face that they'll see. So she'll stay with them while they pass so they're not alone. And it's very upsetting, but I think it's very important to read. So then part 2 is when she's at home, which, like I said, I did not expect this. And I don't really want to talk too much about this because, part 1, I can't really spoil anything that happens from that because she's a war nurse in Vietnam. So you can just assume things that are going to happen in that. Part 2, I really don't want to spoil anything, but I will say, I think that Kristin Hanna did a really great job of showing. I've obviously never been in the military. Actually, like, one of my worst fears is being in the military. It's just not for me. I have a cousin who served, and I have been on his army bases, and I've just been so scared when I was there. I feel like I stepped one foot out of line, and there I'm like, I'm done. Like, I don't know. It just it scares me. There's too many rules. But so I don't know. I can't speak to this firsthand experience, but I felt like reading this, I got a really good look at what it's like to come home and try to be reassimilating when you are a completely changed person. And imagine that in the Vietnam War. She was there for a while, and when she came home, the tide of the war changed. Public sentiment has changed. The Kent State, is it a massacre? I want to say that happened. Like, Nixon's in office. Watergate happens in this book. Like, there is so much that I don't want to give anything away because I really liked how that all played out. I also really loved when she gets to Vietnam, she befriends 2 other nurses, and the 3 of them just have this bond that they have forever that lasts throughout the whole story. I really liked this book. I did, though, the first half worked so much more for me. I'm not sure if it's because I weirdly liked reading about her time in Vietnam. I felt like I was really learning a lot, but I did learn so much in the second because that's where you were learning the public sentiment and what these returning soldiers were dealing with. It is honestly, like, kind of shocking from today's perspective to think about what it was like for them. I It was a little slow for me, kind of more in the second part, but I still really enjoyed this book. When I wasn't reading it, I was thinking about it. I couldn't wait to keep picking it up. I gave it 4 stars. I really I just thought this was, to me, this seemed like the perfect introduction to Vietnam fiction. And I am hoping now that, one of the biggest authors has done it. I'm hoping this becomes a bit more of a trend. And there are so many stories to be told of the Vietnam era, and I just want to learn them. And if you have any recommendations for me, please let me know. I'm ready to learn and have my mind opened up. I really love this. If you like Kristin Hanna, you will like this. It stays true to her storytelling, her writing. It was really great. I gave it 4 stars. That is The Women by Kristin Hanna. All right, time to wrap it up. We haven't done mood reads in a few weeks, but it is back this week. The first comes from Carrie Gets Literary on Bookstagram, and she is in the mood for a book that would make a non-crier read. So I was thinking, like, what book made me cry the most? When I read Me Before You by Jojo Moyes, I tell this story kind of frequently in real life. So I read this book before I was, like, super back into reading, and it was because the movie was coming out, and I love Sam Claflin, so I had to go see it. And I read the book, and I finished reading it. Like, I was commuting to New York City for work at the time, so I was reading it on the train. Not okay. I got home from work, and I had like an hour to finish it because I was being picked up to go see the movie that night, and I have never cried so hard in a book as I have when I finished this book. I was a mess, and I finished it right as my friend was pulling up to go to the movies. So I was, like, still crying from the book as I got in the car to go to the movie. And then I cried all over again in the movie. And it was just like, and to quote, this is a niche reference if someone will get, but it was an army of tears. Points if you got that. I just cried so much. The next one, I'm obsessed with this. So Jordan Gets Lit on Bookstagram is in the mood for insane girl energy, a la I support women's rights and women's wrongs. Like, obsessed. So she gave in the example something in the vein of Stone Cold Fox, which you know that I love. So I recommend The Lies I Tell. This came out back when, a few years ago, when it seemed like we were getting all these scammer con artist books. And it is a scammer con artist book, but it's about a woman. Oh my God. Also, how many times this episode did I say woman? It's about a woman on a mission with a vendetta, and I loved it. And the final one comes from Brianna, and she's in the mood for something you've got mail vibes for spring. So for this, I would say Love on the Brain by Ali Hazelwood. That the trope in that book is you've got mail trope. But also, I have not read this yet. I did just get a NetGalley copy from the publisher, and it said on it, you've got mail vibes. So it's a book that is coming out soon called Summer Fridays, which would be perfect for the warm weather. That is our show. Thank you so much for listening. I just love sitting down and doing this. I feel so lucky that I get to do it every week. And I'm so happy that and grateful that you are here. Please make sure you're following the show on Instagram at Professional Book Girl. Follow me at KRedWhat. Make sure you are following, subscribe to every test on whatever podcast platform you are listening on. Read our book club pick, listen for the lie by I almost said February, by March 28th. And if you want to have your thoughts part of the episode, get them to me by March 26th. That is all. I will see you next week. Oh, wait, I'm lying. I will see you Thursday for my interview with Stephanie Dray.